10 in auto electronics. Today we're talking about our custom wiring project service that we offer. This is for all vehicles, not just this one. This is a Ford 1966 Ford Galaxie we worked on. So until this thing was dropped off, I really had no idea like what was going on or what the project entailed. So we've got like just loose wiring, random wiring everywhere. Radiator hose collapsed on itself here. I don't know, I guess it just has to be bled, I'm assuming. Got some wires going through there. But basically he gave us a fuse box, an interface, a network cable, and a dashboard that looks like this. I guess we have to Dakota Digital figure this out with the control box, the cables, all the senders. Like there's nothing in this thing at all. Just totally bare. So we basically have to wire everything up. Alright, we've got an update here on this thing. So we flipped the battery around. That's going to give us just better angles for our wiring. We're running to a hot and a ground, basically from the battery to a 50 amp fuse to the new fuse box inside the car. This pink one is ignition hot. We're going to move that to the fuse box inside the car. This goes to his alternator. It's got 175 amp around there. We figured out this relay here is for his radiator fan, which I don't know if because this wire crimp was bad, wasn't getting any power, wasn't working. He just hooked up a switch, and the switch went, of course it fell out also because the crimp was bad there, but the switch came right from the hot side of the battery into the switch, and out of the switch to the radiator fan was the fused side. So yeah, we may just get rid of the switch, and because the temp sensor here is for the radiator fan right here into the relay, I just don't know why the relay is not working or why he decided to put a switch in. Either way, wiring we started to clean up. As you remember, there was kind of wiring everywhere around here, so we're pulling all the wiring out. There's not going to be any wiring anywhere anymore. This goes to the starter. So this is the starter trigger. That's the only one there's going to be down there, but we'll refeed that and kind of reroute it. Everything else in the middle here is going to get fed in a loom down the center, and then to the right, our power ground is going to go in there on the left side, and then it travels right to the corner. All other wires, we're going to install the headlight harness for him because he left that. But all the wires are going to go in this hole over here, this rubber grommet, and it's just going to clean up everything in the engine bay. Now, it gets a little fun. So he has this ignition switch like you saw earlier, just kind of sitting there. We're going to rewire that, like I said. Here's kind of our thought process. I apologize for the light, but that's all I got right now. Here's kind of where we're going to mount the fuse box and the grounding post next to it. So we're going to have our battery hot going in the fuse box. We're going to have a battery directly grounded to the grounding block. All of our grounds are going to be right there, nice. And then all of our accessories, we're going to get wired into here. So we have a lot of different stuff. A lot of stuff's not going to get used. Like obviously it doesn't have a fuel pump. Everything's mechanical. But ignition 1, EFI, battery 1, accessory, stuff like that's gonna get fed off of here instead of the engine bay feeding it. Horn, hazard switch, stuff like that. So we're kind of going above and beyond for the guy. It's gonna be some more work, but I think he'll appreciate it in the long run. Here is our wire coming in, and that's just gonna get fed somewhere on the firewall here, and then these wires we're going to move. It's not going to come in here, it's going to come into the grommet over here. So all of our wires are going to come into this top grommet. Hopefully they'll all fit. I think they will. And then it'll be all tucked up nice. And then the only other thing we have to do is run 2 wires. Looks like he grounded one right there to the frame. That's kind of silly. We're going to run the sender wire for the fuel tank, and then the ground kind of up the driver's side floorboard here, and then under this, and then it'll just kind of go into our fuse box and gauge cluster assembly, and the gauge cluster control module, which is also going to get mounted somewhere up here, and everything is going to be in this corner. So super nice. It's coming together. Should be done shortly, so we'll just do another video as we go. So with all that wiring work we did, we finally finished it in about 30 to 40 hours, which came in under budget from what the customer was looking for. We did have to space out the wheel a little bit just so this would fit, or the steering shaft, at least steering column. But this kind of piece came with the gauge cluster, so we just had to get screws that actually attach it to the factory dash. All the gauges are working. I'll show you that in a little bit. But first I'll show you kind of the fuse box assembly that we were provided. So we wired all this up. We ran all the wires to the engine bay. We did all the loom, the tape job. So it's a little bit loose there. Got to tighten that one up. But everything in here we hooked up. So the gauges, the accessory, a lot of these go to the control box for the gauge cluster right there, and then all the sensors go into this control box as well. So we have power and ground going out the passenger side firewall, and then we have additional wires going out through a grommet on the driver's side. And then we'll take a look at the engine bay next. And here's the engine bay. Far cry from what it originally looked like. We'll start with the battery up front. We did flip it around, like I mentioned, just a cleaner look. We've got everything loomed and zip tied and taped here nice. Nothing's visible anymore. We've just got one wire going to the alternator down here. Everything else is cleaned up. You see there's just nothing here at all. And we cleaned up some of this fuse box. This little block here was existing. We had to add one for the interior fuse panel. And then we have some of our power going on this side because we didn't want to run the length of the firewall. And then we've got some sensors here. We fixed the fan wiring. The fan was blowing the wrong way, so polarity was reversed, and it didn't work with the temp sensor. So we got that all sorted out. Basically, when this gets to a certain temperature, the inside probe is going to expand and then ground out on the outside probe, and then that triggers the relay for the fan to turn on. And we've got all this loomed together, the electric choke here, and that kind of goes down into the firewall through a grommet there. And then the fan wiring we ran this way, up the driver's side fender, and then into the vehicle there. So that's a brief overview. We'll start up the car next. I'll give you a little synopsis on the gauges, and the lighting and all that. Here are our gauges. But you get the idea. So right now we have the backlighting on all the time. Again, the customer doesn't have like headlights in, dimmer switch, odometer button, tail lights, all that stuff is not in the car. So for now we have this backlighting just wired in hot to the control box. So the voltage, control box picks that up through the voltage wire that powers the control box. Oil pressure is the sender, wherever that's mounted. Temperature, that's not the probe we were talking about for the fan, that's another sensor mounted kind of behind it. The fuel gauge takes a sending unit signal from the tank. So whether this is your original sending unit or an aftermarket, or you have to match up essentially your ohm readings and your sending unit to match the control box and give you the correct reading. Then you got the clock. You've got some other options like like trip A, trip B, and other things you can display like the RPM in digital format or the mile an hour. Again, those are other switches. This is basically one switch and two switch. And then the tach was pretty simple. You just pick the cylinder number and it calibrates and it just works automatically. The only strange kind of interesting thing to do is the mile an hour. The control box for the Dakota Dash does have a auto calibration feature, which is nice, but you have to drive the car, and this car is not very roadworthy at the moment. It's kind of dicey to drive, but essentially you trigger this setting and then you begin to drive. You drive for 1 mile, so you'd use like a GPS app on your phone or follow another car or whatever. And as soon as you hit the mile, you trigger the switch on and off, or you ground it out, and then it's done. It does its calculations based on the VSS, the signal, however many steps it made or whatever, and then it calculates it based on time. And then that registers the mile an hour correctly depending upon, it doesn't really matter what speed sensor you have or your gear ratio or whatever, it just does it automatically. So everything is cool here. The customer's really going to love this whole setup, and we're proud to have done it. And if you have anything else you have in mind for wiring, let us know. We'll talk about it, we'll take it on, no problem. So thanks for watching, take care, later.